The National Desk, America's News, now.
Gun violence is the leading cause of death among kids and teens. That is something that we should never take as the new normal.
The U.S. Surgeon General has declared gun violence a public health crisis. What we now know about the fast-growing number of injuries and deaths involving firearms in this country. Underwater, the immense flooding threat continues as 60 million people brace for severe weather tonight. Then, when it comes time to retire, will you be in a position to support your family? The worrying numbers that suggest the vast majority of Americans are not ready to end their careers. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. We begin in Las Vegas tonight, where a threat to the community is in custody today. Police say the suspect killed 5 people and critically injured a teen girl in 2 separate shootings at one apartment complex. Las Vegas police say that 47-year-old Eric Adams, pictured right here, entered one apartment, shot and killed 2 women while injuring the girl. Police also found 3 other victims nearby, 2 women and a man, also killed by gunfire. At this time, it is not known what relationship, if any, the suspect had with the victims. The shooting comes on the very day the U.S. Surgeon General has declared gun violence an urgent public health crisis. In a new advisory released today, Dr. Vivek Murthy demanded more action to stop firearm violence, which is now the leading cause of death for American kids.
Well, I certainly know that the issue of gun violence has been politicized and polarized over the years. But my hope is this advisory is that we can actually take it out of the realm of politics and put it into the realm of public health, which is where it belongs.
In 2022 alone, more than 48,000 people in the United States died from firearm-related injuries, according to provisional data. And while mass shootings make up about 1% of gun deaths, Murthy notes that number is rising. The advisory says fears about gun violence are particularly common among children, with many worrying they will experience an incident at school. Murthy is calling for more gun laws, including requirements for safe and secure firearm storage, a ban on assault weapons, and universal background checks. Right now, around 30 million Americans are at risk for severe thunderstorms with damaging wind and large hail possible in the Great Plains and also across the Midwest. Parts of the Midwest, in fact, are still at risk of flash flooding, which has been wreaking havoc in multiple Midwestern states for days. A dam in southern Minnesota is still at risk of falling. Officials say the water flow decreased today, but they're still watching for problems. 66 million people are under heat alerts meantime right now, with potentially dangerous conditions forecast for the rest of the day and also tomorrow in the southern plains, mid-south and southeast. The north central U.S. will get some relief from the hot temperatures through tomorrow. The third and last day of hearings on the Mar-a-Lago documents case has concluded. Judge Eileen Cannon did not reach a decision to limit the scope of evidence allowed in the trial or whether to throw the case out entirely. Donald Trump's lawyers say Jack Smith was improperly appointed as special counsel. Prosecutors claim Trump's lawyers are attempting to hijack the case with allegations that are not associated with the trial at all. Cannon was appointed to the bench by then President Trump and has faced intense scrutiny for her handling of the case. Travis Eugene Posey, the man accused of killing 4 people in an Arkansas grocery parking lot last Friday, has pleaded not guilty. Posey is charged with 4 counts of murder and 10 charges of attempted murder, now being held without bail. 2 police officers were among those wounded in the shooting. Posey faces life in prison or possibly the death penalty if convicted. And this just in, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has arrived at a U.S. federal court in the Northern Mariana Islands. He has agreed to plead guilty to a felony espionage act charge as part of a deal with the United States to release him from prison in the UK. Assange is expected to be sentenced to the 5 years he has already served in the UK. Russia has summoned the United States ambassador to issue a formal warning. Expect retaliation. It comes after an attack launched by Ukraine using U.S.-made weapons and following more than 2.5 years of war that began when Russia first invaded Ukraine. Here's national correspondent Christine Frizzell.
Sounds of laughter followed by panic at a beach in Sevastopol, Crimea, the site of a missile strike Sunday launched by Ukraine. Russian authorities say more than 150 people were injured and at least 4 killed, including 2 children, and are blaming the United States.
Washington is directly involved, not only by supplying the missiles, but also fully controlling their flight missions. The strike targeting civilians in Sevastopol will not go unanswered.
The U.S. State Department brushing off the threat with a reminder it was Russia that started the war in Ukraine in the first place.
We provide weapons to Ukraine so it can defend its sovereign territory against armed aggression. That includes in Crimea, which of course is part of Ukraine. And Russia could stop this war today.
Instead, there are new fears of escalation. With new reports, Russia's considering violating a treaty it signed and planning to launch a nuclear anti-satellite weapon into orbit. Also last week, signing a defense pact with North Korea and recently bringing one of its nuclear-powered submarines to Cuba, incredibly close to the United States. For its part, the U.S. is expected to announce another $150 million in munitions for Ukraine. And last week, the Pentagon gave Ukraine's military the green light to use long-range missiles provided by the U.S. to strike targets inside Russia.
The Russians right now are trying to pitch this both internationally and domestically, the war in Ukraine, as one now increasingly between Russia and not Ukraine, but the West and especially the United States.
Now, Seth Jones of CSIS says there are 2 main reasons for this. First, it helps Vladimir Putin domestically at a time the Russian economy isn't great and tens of thousands of Russian soldiers are dying in the war. But also internationally, it helps them to bring continued military aid from China and Iran and others who want to see the United States' global power be diminished. Amira?
And Christine, what kind of specific consequences might the U.S. be looking out for at this point?
So experts tell me this isn't World War III, at least not yet. But it is both sides sort of moving up the escalation ladder, and that's concerning, especially when one of those parties is led by Vladimir Putin.
Indeed. All right. Christine Frizzell, live from Washington, D.C. Thank you. With the backdrop of increased tensions at the Israel-Lebanon border and an 8-month-long military bombardment in Gaza, today Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant continued talks in Washington, D.C., meeting with Secretary Lloyd Austin, warning that time is running out for Israel's ability to deter Hezbollah in Lebanon, backed by Iran, while also reiterating the need to get hostages home from Gaza. U.S. officials emphasized to Gallant the need to de-escalate militarily.
But the only way to bring them all home is principled diplomacy. And we must not miss this moment. And we must not risk indefinite war and insurgency.
New tonight, the Oklahoma Supreme Court says the state's plan for a publicly funded religious charter school is unconstitutional. Last October, the Oklahoma Charter School Board approved the St. Isidore as a charter school and for classes to begin in August. Attorneys for St. Isidore say they are open to appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court, citing religious discrimination. In the meantime, it is unclear what will happen with the prospective students and employees of the new school. Arkansas residents will no longer be able to select X instead of male or female on their driver's licenses. The state Supreme Court there reinstating a new rule prohibiting the option. The justices didn't explain their reasoning, but critics say the change could harm non-binary people. The rule will only last until July 14th, so the state is working to make it permanent. And it comes as lawmakers in Nassau County, New York, approved a bill that would ban transgender athletes from women's and girls' sports teams at county-owned facilities. The county executive is expected to soon sign that bill. Coming up, scientists have collected samples from the far side of the moon for the first time ever. What this could reveal about the solar system. Then, which states are holding primary elections tonight and what's at stake as voters rush to the polls? And later, the stress can be overwhelming when a loved one with memory issues wanders away. How a nonprofit in Florida is helping address the problem when we come back. The ransomware deadline placed on the Federal Reserve Bank has come and gone. The cyber criminal group Lockbit has claimed to have hacked 33 terabytes of sensitive data and said they would release that information sometime today if the Fed didn't respond to its demands. The hackers say they have Americans' bank secrets and wrote the bank should hire a better negotiator after breaching their servers 2 days ago. Meanwhile, cybersecurity experts say they're skeptical of the claims since Lockbit hasn't provided any solid sample data of these alleged secrets. In February, the FBI, in conjunction with Interpol, disrupted Lockbit's infrastructure with multiple international arrests, but have not completely shut them down. China has made spaceflight history yet again. The nation's robotic Chang'e 6 mission returned lunar samples from the moon's mysterious far side to Earth today, something that's never been done before. For Chinese leader Xi Jinping, this marks a giant leap toward what he calls his eternal dream of establishing China as a dominant space power.
So the only country that's landed on the far side, that side facing away from us, is China. So the fact that they've landed now 2 missions on that side of the moon, and one of which has actually returned stuff back to Earth, is a pretty big deal.
The successful mission marks significant scientific advancement. The gathered material could help answer some big questions about the solar system's early history and the origins of life on Earth. President Joe Biden's promise to help Americans with student debt took another hit in the courts. As the National Desk's Matt Gelka tells us, a ruling this week will impact millions of student loan repayments.
A new program called the SAVE Plan. It's the most affordable student loan plan ever.
Large portions of President Joe Biden's student loan repayment plan are now on hold after 2 federal judges halted it. The ruling came about a week before millions of borrowers were set to see lower payments through the plan. Attorney generals in Kansas, Missouri, and other states argued the SAVE plan was an attempt to get around a Supreme Court ruling blocking student debt forgiveness last year.
It was a promise made by the Biden administration, but even Nancy Pelosi and other commentators on the left at the time said that they don't have the authority to do these types of things.
Education Secretary Miguel Cardona said the administration will continue pushing for debt relief, releasing a statement that read in part, Republican elected officials and special interests sued to block their own constituents from being able to benefit from this plan. Republicans have continually bashed the loan forgiveness efforts as bailouts on the backs of other taxpayers who paid their loans.
When the Supreme Court ruled against him, then he just said, hey, we'll figure a different way to do it. He is bypassing the other 2 branches of government to push an ideological view.
Around 4 million people qualified to have their loan repayment be zero under the SAVE plan because they didn't make enough money, and it reduced the payments of others based on income requirements. The judge's rulings temporarily stopped the administration from new student loan forgiveness. House Budget Chairman Jody Arrington says the administration's moves just keep piling on unsustainable debt.
The unilateral executive actions, the cost there is a total of $2 trillion, a third of which is the student loan bailout. So we're now at the highest level of annual deficit.
Multiple polls have shown that student loan forgiveness is a very divisive issue for voters. And a Bankrate survey from this month shows that about 1 in 5 voters say that student debt will impact their vote. For the National Desk in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka.
Matt, thank you. Americans are feeling a little less optimistic about the economy. That's according to new research from the Conference Board. The Consumer Confidence Index dropped from 101.3 in May to 100.4 in June. The decline was driven by people's expectations for the next 6 months, but people's view of current conditions actually rose just a bit. Many Gen Xers fear they won't have enough money to retire. A new survey from Prudential Financial says only 20% of people 10 years out from retirement are on the right track at this moment. Experts recommend having 8 times your salary in retirement savings at the age of 55. But the average savings of 55-year-olds right now is $50,000, so quite a stark contrast. Many of them say they plan to rely on family for support. 3 states hold primary elections today, and a 4th, South Carolina, has a runoff election for an open congressional seat following their state primary held 2 weeks ago. In New York, 2 high-profile Democrats are on the ballot, most notably Congressman Jamal Bowman, facing a tough challenge from a moderate Democrat and County Executive George Latimer. In the past few weeks, this race has turned on the party's divide over the war in the Middle East and whether or not the U.S. should unconditionally support Israel in their fight against Hamas. Today on X, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo likened Bowman's criticism of Israel's war strategy to anti-Semitism and a reason for New Yorkers to vote him out. If he loses, he would become the first Democratic incumbent to lose renomination this year. Fellow squad member Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she is also being challenged, but she is expected to win. In Utah, voters will pick their choices for Congress and governor, but the big race is who will succeed Senator Mitt Romney as the Republican nominee. 4 candidates are on the ballot, and the winner would be the prohibitive favorite to win in November. While in Colorado, Congresswoman Lauren Boebert is running today for the state's 4th district. Recent polls from Kaplan Strategy show Boebert with 40% support, but nearly 40% are also saying they are undecided. As with Utah, the winner of today's primary would be predicted to win the general election. More than 550,000 Ford pickup trucks are being recalled because the transmission can suddenly downshift to first gear regardless of the truck's speed. It covers certain 2014 F-150 pickups. Ford says drivers could lose control of the trucks. Owners can get a free software update from their dealers, and Ford expects the repairs to be available sometime between July and September. Also being recalled, more than 20,000 Tesla Cybertrucks to fix problems with windshield wipers that could fail and trim pieces that can come loose, impacting visibility on the roads. This is the 4th time the vehicle has been recalled since it was launched in November of last year. Truck owners will be notified by mid-August. The man charged in rapper Tupac Shakur's murder will remain behind bars before the trial happens. 61-year-old Dwayne Keffe D. Davis requested to be out on house arrest pending the trial, but the judge said Davis could not be released on a $750,000 bond, citing concerns that the money wasn't secured legally. Davis is accused of playing a role in the 1996 drive-by shooting that killed Tupac. He has pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder, and his trial is scheduled for November. When a cancer patient's immune system can't fight the disease, a cutting-edge therapy could be the answer to recovery by relying on that patient's immune system. Medical reporter Liz Bonus explains with the story of one patient who's now healing from multiple myeloma.
Hey there, hello to you. After an initial stem cell transplant, one survivor now sharing his story with us. He recently received a newer therapy for blood cancer, which has led to remarkable results.
Truly amazing because I'm back. I can do 10 push-ups again.
More than a decade ago, Vince Richardson, a former phys ed instructor, told me he was diagnosed with what's called multiple myeloma.
It's actually a blood cancer that affects the bones.
When it recently returned, Dr. Edward Faber and his team here celebrating this new blood cancer healing center at Ohio's University of Cincinnati Cancer Center used Vince's own immune system to fight back.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, totally amazing. I'm amazed every day.
Vince was given what's called CAR T cell therapy. He says he was one of the first with multiple myeloma to receive this therapy.
It's a way that we're able to manipulate or restore the normal function of the immune system to attack and fight cancer cells.
Here's how CAR T cell therapy works. Vince's own T cells, which fight infection, are taken out of his body. The cells are then altered to target a specific protein on his cancer cells and then infused back into his body.
The CAR T is, in its rightful sense, the true immunotherapy. So we're getting closer with understanding the immune system, which many of us believe is the key to longer remissions and even cures in sometimes uncurable cancers that we consider today.
Sure enough, Vince is now once again in remission, feeling none of the side effects he says he did with his initial stem cell transplant.
I feel fine. They couldn't believe it. I couldn't either.
Now the next step in this therapy is to learn more about reducing any long-term risks to patients such as Vince. With your health news, I'm Liz Bonus reporting.
All right, Liz, thank you. And coming up, swatting is now one of the most challenging issues facing law enforcement in our nation's capital. How it's impacting communities after this. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America.
Lisa Willis has lived in Louisville her whole life, but when she and her friend decided to travel to Cincinnati to stand in Taylor Swift's Eras Tour merch line, she had no idea that just hours later, she'd be internet viral.
I came home and slept because we were so tired from being out there, and my friend had messaged me and was like, is this you? Because this is something that you would do. And I remember being like, where did you see this? Like, how did you get a hold of this? This was in Cincinnati, like we are in Louisville. And she said, it's everywhere.
Willis had called in sick to work that day in order to wait in line for coveted Taylor Swift merch. And when we asked her for an interview, she requested her identity shall remain anonymous, so work wouldn't find out. What started as a funny take on Swifties' dedication soon became an internet sensation.
Hundreds of students hunkered down at Bethesda Chevy Chase High School just weeks ago after a swatting incident triggered a full-scale armed response.
Everybody all right?
Days later, a 78-year-old Virginia woman had her house surrounded by police, responding to a fake call she'd been murdered by her son. Her son is former D.C. police officer Michael Fanone, nearly killed in the January 6th riots. He is an outspoken critic of Donald Trump.
Donald Trump doesn't care about things like honor, integrity, shame.
Hours after Michael Fanone referred to Trump as authoritarian outside the hush money trial, Fanone's mother was swatted.
It's common for a person living with dementia or similar cognitive conditions to wander or get confused about their location, even in the early stages. It can be life-threatening, and the stress often weighs heavily on caregivers and their family members. A nonprofit located inside the Kane Center in Stewart says they're here to help thanks to a big donation. They just received a shipment filled with dozens of tracking bracelets they say is equipped with proven technology to help bring loved ones home safely.
Truly, time is of the essence. When somebody wanders, it is imperative that we find them. Who knows where they could go?
Coming up, a woman just completed a historic 24-mile swim to Baltimore's Inner Harbor, the milestone she was celebrating, when we come back. From the Bay to Baltimore, ultra-marathon swimmer Katie Pumphrey made waves today with a historic 24-mile swim from the Chesapeake Bay Bridge to Harbor Place in Baltimore's Inner Harbor. The swim was meant to celebrate the recently announced milestone that Baltimore is now swimmable and accessible to fishing, a 13-year endeavor for a harbor once considered too polluted to do any of that kind of activity. Pumphrey began her swim at 3 a.m. this morning and completed it just a couple of hours ago. The Baltimore native had support vessels making the voyage with her, allowing her to be shuttled water and food. Pretty incredible. Great job, Katie. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. I'm Amira David. Thank you so much for watching.